Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics, brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the owner of Guelph, Ontario's comic shops, The Dragon, as well as the president of the comics retailer trade organization ComicsPro. It's Jenn Haines. Thanks for coming on, Jen.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So I have to admit, one of the things that I've always been a fan of from afar about The Dragon, many things. I mean, I've heard great things about you for years, but the thing that I really love about it is the fact it's called The Dragon, which I think is just awesome. I've always actually, one of my things is I've always wanted to have my own comic shop, and I've thought of like a million names, and there's something about The Dragon that just is like singularly cool. How did that happen? Like, why was that the name you went with way back in 1998?
Well, you know, it was a couple of things. So first of all, The Dragon obviously evokes a certain sort of fantasy, mythological world. We're a hybrid store, so we carry gaming as well. So Dungeons and Dragons has always been obviously at the forefront of the gaming circuits. And so, you know, having a name like The Dragon immediately conjures up ideas of fantasy and myth and that sort of world that people would enter. But it's also really easy to remember. And one of the key components of any small business is word of mouth advertising. And if you have a name that's easily remembered and can be told to another person, then that word of mouth advertising becomes much more useful. So having a name like The Dragon, which is memorable and also, you know, easy to pass on to another person, that just made sense for that particular advertising area.
Yeah, I mean, it totally makes sense. Plus, it's really fun to say. I don't know why. The Dragon just sounds awesome. Like, there was this, I played this video game called Overwatch, and there's this one character in it who, whenever he would use his big special thing, he'd yell out, "The Dragon!" And I was just like, when I think of your shop's name, I always think of it as Genji from that game would say it. So I like somehow take the nerdiness to a second level, a higher level that was previously unforeseen before then.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I look back at it because it was a long time ago. I was very young. I was 23 when I opened the store, and I think back and I think, well, maybe I should have done something more unique and more, you know, I don't know, something bigger than just The Dragon. Like, there's a real simplicity to it, but I think the simplicity works. I actually originally registered as Dragon's Lair, but there was another Dragon's Lair business that had existed in Ontario that had developed a reputation that I maybe didn't want to translate to my own business. Mm-hmm. So I decided to change it kind of like at the last minute before I opened. And yeah, I mean, I think it's great. Like, it's wholly me. It's just uniquely me. You know, there are other Dragon's Lairs, but I've never met another or seen another store called The Dragon. There you go.
It's the. I think the does it. But I've been to a Dragon's Lair in Austin, which is a good shop, but not The Dragon.
Oh yeah, the Dragon's Lair in the States they're amazing shops. But yeah, there was just an association I did not want to go with. It's interesting though too, like having the name Dragon. It also has made people think that we are affiliated with sort of all other stores named Dragon. So any other comic or game store with Dragon in their name, we've been asked, you know, oh, are they part of your business? Like, no, it's a separate business. Yeah. So but it's kind of neat to have that like sort of camaraderie and theme between different stores. You know that a store called with Dragon in its title has that. Client base has that product mix. So
totally. Well, so you already said it. You started your shop when you were 23. The shop was in 1998, which was a really fascinating time in comics because it was like right after the distributor wars. It was right after Marvel went bankrupt. It was like right around when Marvel Knights was about to happen. So it was it kind of felt like a fork in the road moment. But so obviously with everything that was going on in the comics world, you had other products clearly. What made opening a comic shop something you wanted to do at the time?
So, I mean, it's interesting you bring up like the distributor wars thing because I actually was totally unaware of that at the time. And the store, I had been working at a store in my hometown for a few years, and we the owner there only ordered from Diamond, so I had no concept that there were other distributors of comics at all, which is
Mm-hmm.
it's really weird now looking back. I'm like, how did I not even know that this was happening? Uh, but I was going to university in Guelph, and there was a comic shop here in town, and when I went into it, it was kind of it was a stereotypical space. There was a lot of, dusty fixtures. The staff were very surly and not very welcoming of my presence. I was expected to know my way around comics. They would go to flea markets and buy up stuff and put it in the front of the store. So there was this weird flea market section as soon as you walked in. It was a very odd place.
Yeah.
It was a little bit sketchy. And, that experience, I just knew that Guelph deserved better. It deserved a place where people like me could walk into the store and feel welcome, or families could come in and parents could feel comfortable, potentially even, leaving their children there. Not that I recommend that, but, it was the store I worked at in my hometown was very much like that. It was a really clean, open, welcoming space. And I didn't even really realized for a long time how fortunate I was that that's where I started collecting, that I was able to explore my interests and, find all these cool things on the shelf without the fear of people judging me because of my gender. And that was really a great gift that I had from that business. And there were parents who did leave their children and go have lunch, which was really strange. It was like, we're not free babysitters. I don't even know. But the idea that they felt comfortable doing that was what I wanted to replicate, was a space where parents felt that comfortable bringing their kids in.
Mm-hmm.
And so, kid focus, and just this idea that everyone who walks in the store is our customer, whether they fit into the traditional demographic of a comic reader or not. That's the foundation of the Dragon. I wanted it to be family focused. Not family friendly. That's not enough. Family focused, where you're thinking about how a family interacts in the space. You're thinking about how children are taking in the surroundings. So, having a separated kids section, having all of the aisles wide enough for strollers and therefore also wheelchairs. These are really important things to me, that people know that we are there for their whole family to come and shop together. And that is pretty predominantly our customer base.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, as a child who was often left to his own devices at a comic shop in my youth, I really appreciate that perspective, because if they had just kicked me out or were really mad at me because I was sitting there and reading and then eventually buying stuff, I do want to point out I wasn't a total urchin. That, I don't know. I mean, it's I don't know if I would have been a comic fan if I grew up in an environment like the one that you were talking about that you went to in Guelph before, because I don't know, those types of things color your experience going forward, whether or not it's welcoming. I mean, if you're a child or if you're a woman or if you're whomever, if it's not, it might taint your relationship with the medium.
For sure. The experience I have in so many stores, even now, walking in and getting just flat out ignored it's kind of shocking. And, that kind of gatekeeping, or that kind of, deciding who I am when I go into a shop, it's so alienating for a new reader. And that's what I want. I want people who are picking up their first comic, or they watch some show and they think that's really cool, and so they're coming to check out what else there might be. And I also want, the serious fans. I want everyone. That's the whole thing. I just want everyone to feel comfortable coming into the store and exploring what they're passionate about, or what they're about to be passionate about.
Mm-hmm. It seems like that's kind of a part of a comprehensive view you have for stuff, because when I was doing my research for this, I was astonished by the fact that seemingly you were a teacher during your period of owning the Dragon. According to you taught at the Linden School in Toronto for 7 years, which honestly, most of the time when I talk to retailers, they're considering how they're going to eat today just because they're so busy. And you're like, oh, I was also a teacher. And then I was you were connected to local conventions and events, and you do ComicsPro stuff. I also want to note that I love the idea of comics in the classroom, which is something you do where you help librarians with collections and understanding comics and how to, make more inclusive, effective collections in their own libraries. all that stuff. Why is like trying to foster a better relationship with comics outside of just the dragon something you wanted to do?
Well, I mean, it's true. I have taken a different trajectory than a lot of retailers.
It's
When
not a
I
bad
opened
thing.
with the Dragon originally, yeah, I know. I'm very happy with how my whole life has gone. But when I opened the Dragon, my plan was always to go back to school. But I had done something like 9 straight semesters because I had gone to school through the summers as well. And I was really burnt out of actual schoolwork. And so I thought I would open a small business, which is crazy, right? So like I graduated in April and then I opened the store in September. Like I didn't even take a real break. I just went full bore into the next project. But then after a couple of years, I decided I went back to school and I got my master's and I moved to Toronto thinking I was going to pursue my PhD. When I was rejected from the program, I found this teaching job, which was such a bizarre, random thing to happen, and discovered that I really love teaching. And I do miss it a lot. So I taught for 7 years. And then I actually went back and taught for another year and a half as well, filling in for some people. And then in the middle of teaching, I went and got my teaching certificate. So I taught for 3 years, went to teacher's college for a year, and then went back for another 4 years. Then I had a baby, and then I taught for another year. So it's been an interesting path. But, I'm in a really unique position now because I understand the classroom needs. I understand teaching needs. I understand that language, but I also understand comics, and I have used comics in teaching. And so I understand how to break them down. So now I write teacher guides for a variety of publishers as well. And I do this work with libraries to help them with their collections. And it's great because I can, dispel their fears about the quality of reading in graphic novels. I go in and do workshops as well for students, and we talk a lot about the visual language of comics and how the story is broken down between words and panels and the transitions. And it's really cool because the students get really engaged because they love talking about this stuff. And they start pulling out things like mood and character development. And then you see the teacher have this light bulb moment where they're like, oh my gosh, there's something more to this than just supporting reluctant readers. Well, maybe I should actually pay attention to comics. So that's like my mission, is to make light bulb moments for adults who just don't understand what it is that we're looking at. Who don't understand how valuable comics can be for all range of students, not just reluctant readers, but also enriched students and everyone in between.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to make this sound more craven than it is or anything like that, but I mean, there is always like by encouraging better better understanding and appreciation of the medium amongst librarians, that makes it more likely that schools and libraries will have more comprehensive collections, which makes it more likely that kids will discover something that they're really going to love, which means that, maybe that person's going to go to the Dragon to find what's next for them. And like, I think that's one of the really cool things about how much comics have grown in libraries and in schools especially it feels like the last 20 years, where they've really embraced it. And it's kind of, when you combine that with like the rise of like Scholastic Graphics and like First Second and Random House Graphic and stuff like that, you have all these different publishers and all these different audiences that maybe weren't served in the same way. But now it's like this creating this pipeline of like future comic or current and future comic readers. And that's good for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing this long enough that, I can think back like 10 years when I was scrounging to find kids' books to put on the shelf. Mm-hmm. And I literally would buy any and every kids' graphic novels. And so were libraries. And there was a whole bunch of like educational graphic novels coming out because they were like getting on the forefront of this new developing area. And they're really terrible. I go into libraries often where a librarian has sort of been there for a long time, and I find these like dusty collections of these books from that like 10-year ago period. And clearly they're not checked out. And so the librarian has decided that they're not worth anything. And honestly, like those books were not the caliber of what kids want to read and what they're excited about. But now we have like just so much available. It's crazy. Like it's overwhelming how much amazing kids graphic novels there are on the market and how high the quality is. It is like I have no end of books to sell libraries. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I go in and evaluate collections in libraries basically, and then figure out what I think that they should bring into the library to enhance not only what they have already in the collection, but what their school's goals and values are, because often that changes from school to school. So it's tough for librarians. They already have to keep on top of every fiction and nonfiction book coming out. They don't have to also have to keep on top of all the graphic novels coming out. That's often where the problem lies, is that they just don't know where to start.
Yeah.
They don't know how to figure out what to stock. So that's my job, is to go in and just say, here's what you should have.
That is awesome. Well, and the thing with a lot of libraries too is like there's specialists. There's people who know X and know Y, and there's somebody else who knows Z and stuff like that. And one thing I really appreciated on your website, on the staff page, you kind of have that too for your staff. It was like each of the staff members is like, this person's an expert at Dungeons and Dragons and manga, and this person's an expert at this and this. And like that, I thought that was really cool. Like that, having kind of subject matter experts, like I can turn to this person if I want to talk about comics, but if I want to talk about Pokemon, this is the person. I am interested in how your product mix, like, what your product mix is and how that's kind of evolved over the years. I know that on your site it showed a lot of like, comics and graphic novels, obviously, but then also collectible card games like Magic and Pokemon, manga, things like that. Is that kind of the predominant mix, or are there just all kinds of random things in there too?
So we do about 45% is comics and graphic novels, 45% is gaming. So collectible card games, board games, Dungeons and Dragons, miniatures, dice, paint, all of that.
Yeah.
And then about 10% is, sort of ancillary merchandise. So plushies, T-shirts, action figures. We carry a wide range to cater to anybody who might be coming in. So we have like little plushies for kids who just want like an add-on purchase. We have like things like keychains and wallets and stuff like that for people who want something that is reflective of their interests, but don't necessarily want to buy a book. And then we have like higher end action figures. We've dabbled in things like statues, but they don't really do super well for us.
Yeah.
We find that our customer base tends to be a little bit more casual. Even, our regular subscribers, they come in, when they come in. We're not a Wednesday Warrior store at all. Our customers are very casual. And our player base for our Magic and Pokemon is also very casual when we're allowed to have games.
Right.
But that's a conscious choice to make sure we really require that all of our gaming events are family focused as well, so that kids can come to any event. So we're very on top of people about their language, not only profanity, but it has to be very inclusive. And we've, as a result, created a player base that is a very aggressively casual player base, is how I describe it. Grinders are just not welcome at the Dragon. They're just, they can come, but they're going to find out pretty quickly that that's not the place for them, and they're going to choose another place to go. And that's fine, because protecting my community is the most important thing to me. That community remain a place that is open and welcoming and allows people to come in and learn, and allows kids to come in, and is just not a place where it's all about the competition. It should be about the game. So we have just really a wide range. We do Games Workshop. We do, we have a lot of stuff. And it's been that way since I opened. The store I used to work at was like that as well. And I kind of modeled my store on that. And I think it's good because, having multiple product areas, when one is a little bit soft, the other ones can take its place and kind of prop up the overall store. So it's helpful for the overall health of the store, I think, to have multiple product lines. It is a little exhausting to maintain them, I'm not gonna lie. There's a lot of stuff, and I have a lot of distributors. Like, I work with so many distributors on a regular basis to make sure that I have all the products that I want to stock. And I'm constantly looking for new product lines as well. So I attend gift shows to find other companies that are producing So these pop culture items that aren't necessarily available or that aren't promoted to the comic industry, there's so much out there. It's amazing. You just have to go looking for it. So yeah, that's our product mix.
It does feel kind of funny because it's like, okay, 1998, but that was definitely a high time for Pokemon because that was when it was first kind of hitting the scene and everything like that. But it is interesting to think about how I feel like so many different, so much of that product mix is kind of like at or near its apex in terms of broader scale popularity right now. Because it's like, I bet in 1998, the average person couldn't have imagined like Dungeons and Dragons connecting on the level it is today, or like, collectible card games. Like a lot of those things seem like fads to a certain degree, like Pokemon and Magic. I mean, I remember when Magic was first coming out, it kind of felt like it was going to be that, but here it is, still incredibly popular. It is kind of interesting, like how those products have went from like, to a certain degree popular with like maybe let's say those grinders, those people who are like really like fervent about it, to really connecting on a broader scale in 2021. I mean, despite everything else that's going on, they're just immensely popular. I mean, for my wife's 40th birthday, we played Dungeons and Dragons for the first time. She never played it before, and she always wanted to, and so we did, and it was great.
D&D has been a huge surprise and a joy to see it come back to the strength that it had. For a really, really long time, decades, it was considered this weird basement game for the kids who weren't popular at school. And a lot of that was spurred on by propaganda in like the 70s and 80s about what D&D would do to you.
Yeah.
I guess more in the 80s. But, it's with Stranger Things especially, that really popularized it and brought it back into attention. And it has been amazing. And honestly, like, I can't even believe the number of D&D books that we sell every week. When a new release comes out, my pre-orders are crazy. And then with the lockdown, absolutely, people were playing it like there's no tomorrow, basically. We sold a lot of D&D, and then also a lot of paint. A lot of people were like, I'm just going to start painting now. I'm going to get into miniature painting.
Yeah.
So those two areas became this big hot section. I mean, D&D was already pretty hot, but it pushed it up to another level. People had time to sort of be at home, read the books. They wanted to do something with their family that didn't involve going out. And so D&D is totally that escapism from your living room.
I love it. Yeah. I have to admit, I was very surprised by how mentally taxing playing D&D was. There's so much like mental visualization that's going on. It was, afterwards, I was like, I think I need a nap. This is a lot, or like a big cup of coffee. But yo, everybody, I want to take a quick second to give a shout out to my friends at Bad Idea. You may have heard of this experimental new comic book publisher. They're the crew that debuted recently in select comic shops worldwide with Matt Kint and Doug Braithwaite's ENIAC #1. And they did that a little differently than their peers. First, each issue is oversized and ad-free. Second, each issue comes with a bonus B-side story, giving readers a little something extra with each issue. Lastly, and this is the wild part, so listen up, they don't publish variants, trades, or digital versions of their comics, so if you want one or all of them, you better get to the Bad Idea retailer near you and be there on a Wednesday. Don't have one near you? Order online or explore your options for mail order at badideacorp.com to make sure you don't miss out on ENIAC or upcoming titles from creators like Zeb Wells, David LaFuente, Marguerite Bennett, and many more. And now, back to the show. Okay, well, let's talk specifically about comics and graphic novels. I am really interested because that one of the fascinating things about comic shops to me has always been how much they are colored by the person who owns it to a certain degree, or like the location and the customer base. And like for one shop in like Alaska, where I live, versus a shop in like Texas, which is where my wife's from, the comics that are popular one place might not even be popular in the other place, and vice versa. I'm interested in what's working these days for the Dragon in terms of comics and graphic novels. And is there anything that really kind of stands out for you relative to what you hear from your peers?
So we have always been, and so this is reflective of me for sure. So the Dragon has always strived to be as inclusive in our stock mix as possible, as well as like our customer service. And so the idea is that we are not, I know there are a lot of stores out there that are like a Marvel store or a DC store or who are comic focused. So we do actual equal sales in comics and in graphic novels.
Mm-hmm.
They're two very different markets, right? So your comic buyers are buying comics and your graphic novel buyers are buying graphic novels. Sometimes the comic buyers will buy graphic novels, but it usually doesn't go the other way. But understanding that there are two different customer bases is something that has allowed us to sort of create the collection the way that we want to. And we rack our books by genre, not by, alphabetizing or publisher or anything like that, because that's what people expect when they go into a bookstore. So the idea behind that section is that we're catering to book readers, we're catering to general public who have already an established idea of what shopping in a bookstore is. And so we are just giving them the comfort zone of that same experience in our store, where they might feel uncomfortable because it's a different medium. So that's sort of like how we view it. We have a wide range of books, and I could not tell you what necessarily like works and doesn't work, because our goal is to have such a wide range so that we can provide for so many different people.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, like Saga is definitely, always been a huge hit for us in its existence. And, our top 10 books actually of last year, 7 of them were kids' books, which was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all over the place. And I would say that in terms of our book audience, it's way less superheroes and way more everything else.
Yeah.
And it's good. Like I love the fact that we can connect any customer with a book, because we have so many things on the shelf that we can find something that will work for them. Now, the problem is always like trying to keep up with everything, but with having, with strategically having staff members of different tastes, then usually it means that there is a range of what a shopper will experience in terms of what's suggested to them, depending on who's working on that particular day.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good. With single issue comics, I mean, we're much more about current comics. We have a couple of customers who like variants, not so much a big thing for us, and back issues have never really been a big thing for us either.
Mm-hmm.
I've tried at different points to bring in back issues, and it's like such a small handful of customers that the maintenance and the work that has to go into the collection and pricing it and keeping it priced and constantly repricing it, it's just too much. So it doesn't end up being viable for us in the long run to maintain that product line. So so current comics, I don't know. I like to support smaller presses and bring cool products to my customers. And I have a number of customers who have said to me, I used to just read superhero stuff, but then I started picking up these other things, and wow, I'm just like blown away, and I can't believe how great this is. And so it's giving people that opportunity to explore what else is available and to really see. I started off as a superhero reader. I think probably, most people coming into comics do start off as superhero readers. And then one day I picked up an issue of Strangers in Paradise, and that just like blew my mind. Like, what is this thing that is like actual life happening, with a whole mob thing going on as well. But it's, these people are talking about life in this real way. And this actually shows me what is possible in comic readership as well as in comics. And that was like a light bulb moment for me. And I have often said that Strangers in Paradise was the inspiration for the Dragon, was recognizing that there was products out there for everyone, allowed me to say, oh yeah, so I can make a store that will be there for everyone.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah, it is kind of funny. Terry Moore is like very, very good at doing like the, regular life, but also demon type stuff, like in Rachel Rising, or, or like that plus like, Echo, which I don't even know how to really describe, like kind of superhero type power thing stuff going on.
Like superhero sci-fi.
Yeah, superhero sci-fi
soap opera.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, so good at doing that stuff. It's really impressive. But
yep.
I gotta say, so I do think it's interesting how like I feel like the back issue thing, and maybe it's not totally this, but I've talked to comic shops who basically just hand wave kids books. Like even Raina Telgemeier or like Dav Pilkey or like Dogman. It's just they're like the big box stores are going to have those books. I can't compete with them, so they effectively choose not to compete with that. Which to me, I always am like, I would rather have the option of them declining to buy it, or like just having some copies on hand rather than not.
Yep.
But it is interesting where like the kind of the flip side, it's like because I wonder if just like the grinders grinders always just, it feels like a weird thing to say, but those types of gamers don't come in because it's not a good fit for them. Maybe that's the case for back issues too, because it's just like that you're not really courting the old school one because they're already the old school comic customer because they're already super served elsewhere. So you're trying to dig into audiences that might not have service from other shops.
Absolutely. I mean, fundamentally, Guelph is not that big, and it's an hour drive to Toronto where you have your pick of these amazing shops that do have expertise in back issues. And when there was convention season, that was a really great opportunity to get back issues as well. And so I think, there are other people who do it much better. And my sort of customer pool is just not big enough to support me being able to carry that stuff. It's interesting you say about the stores who don't want to carry the kids' books, because that's something I've been talking about for years, that sure, you have competition in big box stores like Barnes & Noble, but why are you now just giving away your business? Because
right.
If you don't carry it, that's effectively what you're doing. You're just choosing to send your customer to Barnes & Noble. But if you had that there, you're telling me that like parent coming in to buy their comics wouldn't necessarily buy, like they would look at the shelf and say, oh, well, I'm just going to pick up this comic for my kid as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's an add-on purchase that is easy to do, and it's totally fits in with the business. And just because it's being sold at another store does not disqualify it as something that stores should carry. I mean, get in on that piece of the pie because it's a big pie.
Yeah.
These books are so hot that anyone stocking them will sell them. So just go for it.
Yeah. I mean, and you don't know if it's going to work unless you try it. I mean, that's the thing is like,
exactly.
This is not me slandering my shop, but it's like, I was really excited for Brenna Thumler's Delicates. I don't know if you read Delicates or Sheets.
Oh my God. So good. I did write the teacher guide for that one.
Oh great.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, like, I love Sheets. I haven't gotten Delicates yet, but that's for a very specific reason. First off, I was an idiot and didn't pre-order it. Second off, my shop didn't order any of it and like had absolutely no idea what it was. And they were like confused when I was bringing it up. And so like, that's a sale that I hate to say it is probably going to take me to Barnes & Noble because they're going to have it. I know it. And it's those types of things. That's the type of process is like somebody goes in and they say, do you have Ghosts or do you have, Amulet book 1? And if the answer is no, then they're going to go somewhere else. And it's like, why rob yourself of that potential sale just because you think that they'll go somewhere else? Because then if you do that, then that they'll go somewhere else. It's very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think shops that have been around for a while maybe had tried in the past or dabbled at it and then it didn't work. And so they didn't. But now they're like, well, I tried it and it didn't work. But the fact is, what I always tell people is you have to give it a year. You have to bring in kids' books for like a year to really establish. And that's the same with any product line, honestly. If you commit to a product line for a year, then people get used to seeing it and they gain confidence that it's going to be there. And that's when, and then they start telling people that it's there. And that's when you start generating it. And I mean, that sounds like a really long time to have to work on a product line to see turnaround, but it's not really. You need to give these things time, and it can't just be a 2-month experiment. Like that's just not enough to actually establish it. When I started my kids section 10 years ago, like really had a pop-out section, it was a whole year of it in the middle of the store as you walked in the front door to get people to really grab onto it. And now it's like a huge part of the business. I could not imagine my store without it.
Mm-hmm. I just want to say also, I really love the fact that you organize your books by genre, because a lot of shops I go to, they have it organized by publisher. And when you're looking at graphic novels, like a random like my wife who appreciates comics has no idea who Dark Horse Comics is. She has no idea
Yeah,
who like
absolutely.
Oni Press is. Like, okay, she knows who Oni Press is because I have an Oni Press shirt, but that's cheating. But anyways, but like she doesn't know all these things. So if she walks in, it's just like, what is this? This means nothing to me. But if you say fantasy, or
Right.
if you say science fiction, she knows that.
Exactly.
It's a common language.
And when a customer sees a book that they like in a section on the shelf, in like the fantasy section, then they know the books all around it are also books that they might like. And so that translates into them picking up other things as well. But it's way too much to ask somebody to know who is publishing each book. Even like comic readers, often not necessarily something that they know. So organizing by genre just makes sense. I mean, maybe fully alphabetical is the other way, but then again, it's like you don't get the cross marketing of having it next to other books that they might like. And that's the benefit, where we all want to be able to talk to all of our customers and hand sell to them and, be there for them as like personal shoppers. But at the same time, there are a lot of people who want that time by themselves to explore on their own. And so giving them the ability to shop hands off and hands on is really key. So that's why you put in signage, and you label your shelf, and you make sure that it's really laid out in an organized way that is understandable at first glance. And then you can also supplement that with, the hands-on shopping experience of giving recommendations and talking about their likes and whatnot.
So tying into that, though, I am interested in, obviously, 2021, it's April 3rd today. We are still in the midst of pandemic. And looking at your site, it says curbside pickup Wednesday and Saturday, home delivery Monday and Friday. Are you still closed to in-store customers?
No, we are open. It says it's curbside Wednesday and Saturday. That seems strange. I'm going to have to check that out.
Okay.
We are open. So we actually, Ontario just went into another lockdown as of this morning, but retail is permitted to be open. And so we are open Wednesday through Saturday from 12 to 6, and then we're doing home delivery actually 4 days a week. We do home delivery in town twice a week, and then out of town 2 times a week as well. And then people can choose to just do curbside pickup if they want to. If they don't want to actually come into the store, they can call ahead and have their stuff ready for pickup pretty easily. So it's a big shift for us. We used to be open 7 days a week and up to 11 hours a day because we were running a lot of gaming events as well. So I've tried to keep my overhead low to support any flagging in sales that we might expect from this period. And there has been some. I mean, we were locked down originally for from March 23rd to we had reopened on July the 2nd. And that was completely closed, no access to the store at all. We weren't even allowed to do curbside for a period of that as well. We could only do delivery. And then we were locked down again, no in-store shopping, December 26th to February 19th, I think. And then we've been able to be open since then. But it's been, the lockdown periods, they have been very tough to get through. And I'm glad that this lockdown we're allowed to stay open. That's for sure.
Yeah, that is good. I was texting with I'm friends with the crew from Big Bang Comics in Dublin, and they've been closed since January, and they have no idea when they're going to be open back up, and that's just it's a lot.
Yeah, and this is their third lockdown as well.
Yeah,
it's been very aggressive there actually. I know that. I've kept on top of it a bit from John's videos and whatnot, but it's hard. It has been the most difficult thing I've ever experienced in my life, not even just in business, but in my life. Mm-hmm. And when we were locked down the first time, it was just, I had to lay off my staff. We didn't know what was happening. We didn't know what government support there was going to be. And we just, it was me and my family in the store. Like my 2 kids were there with me every day. We were just trying to get orders filled They were web orders and phone orders and email and Facebook messages. And every order took so long because there was a back and forth about, well, we have this, we don't have that. Here's your total. Here's how you pay. Okay, now you've paid. What's your address so we can deliver, and all this sort of thing. And then we were delivering all around town. Like this time last year, we actually teamed up with our friends who own the candy store that I was in earlier today, and we did their deliveries for them. So we actually were doing Easter deliveries. And we were driving for like 5 hours a day trying to get all these deliveries done with the kids in the car. And they're just like, oh my gosh, I don't want to go on any more deliveries because it was so crazy. We totally gave up on trying to school them. It was not even happening. Homeschool did not happen at all. Basically, my kids were out of school from, March 12th till September when they went into doing remote online school. So yeah, they both like missed half a year of school essentially, but it was also so chaotic. Like, everyone had to pivot so quickly. So school was this weird pivot as well. And no one knew how to actually like handle it and, what to do and how to assign things. And so it just fell through the cracks. Like there was just only so much I could handle. Mm-hmm. And as we started getting closer to reopening, I really I hit a wall, I think personally and professionally. I was really, even though there was government support, it wasn't very comprehensive. And I was actually getting far less support than I should have been getting just because of bureaucratic limitations that were built into the system. And so I was feeling like really just overwhelmed with everything and having worked so constantly. And so sometime I think it was in like late May, I had like I had an emotional breakdown, I guess, and, put it out on my Facebook, how difficult the time I was having, and how for the first time ever, I was worried about the survival of the store. Mm-hmm. And some friends of ours who are customers set up a GoFundMe for the shop. And that gave us, a good amount of money to help pay the staff that I was bringing back on board so that we could reopen. But even more than that, it was like this message from the community who rallied around the store and said to us, either specifically or just by supporting the GoFundMe, that they believe in the store and it means something to them. And that's not something that you hear very often. Often we hear complaints more than we hear praise because that's just how people are. People will tend to be more vocal about complaining than about praising.
Yeah.
And so many stores, when a store closes, that's when you get all these people saying, oh, if I knew you were going to, at this point I would have, oh, we're going to miss you. And that's often when a store feels its most value is when they're closing, which is a terrible thing to feel. So we got the opportunity. I mean, it was amazing to have that feeling that we really meant something to the community, that all of the work that me and my staff had done to build up this store for everyone, it had actually meant something and it was valuable, and people were saying, no, we need you in our community. And so that was just such an amazing boost to allow me to put in the energy and the time to get it back up and running and to reopen and to move forward. And I don't know. I haven't looked back since. There's been some rocky paths, but that was a real turning point for me. If I hadn't accepted help, then I honestly don't know where I would be right now.
Yo, everybody. I want to take a quick second to give a shout out to Macroverse. Macroverse is an exciting digital comics platform that makes next-gen comics custom crafted for your phone. Macroverse's comics utilize its unique tap story format, which ensures this isn't a PDF on an iPad or an endless scroll, but a designed for mobile experience where every episode is crafted to take advantage of this one-of-a-kind style. Macroverse is curated for quality, with every series they publish being something they believe deserves to be read by a massive audience. Think of it like HBO for comics, with over 35 titles and 400 episodes from names like Brian Stelfreeze, Juan Doe, Paul Scheer, and more. Check out Macroverse today by downloading the app on iOS or Google Play and get started with a rotating collection of free episodes or unlock the entire universe for just $4.99 a month, with half of all profits going to the creators themselves. And now, back to the show. I think that one thing that's been interesting about all of this is, I talked to a lot of retailers for my, like my look back on 2020. And while a lot of shops were within like spitting distance of level with last year or with 2019, like from a revenue standpoint for how much they earned, the thing that always stood out was that it took a lot more work to get to that point than it normally would. And so it was just, that's the thing that people I think were kind of missing. It's just like, oh, wow, like all this stuff is really blowing up. It's doing so well. But then you forget like the human cost to it. And even beyond the fact that there's more work and a lot of shops didn't have as many people working for them, both for I can't afford it reasons, but also for like, I literally cannot socially distance with as many people working for me. And I don't know. I mean, that's one of the things, like the human cost aspect of it, because, just like you're saying, it's like people always think about like how much they love something when it seems like it's going away. But like when you're an outsider and everything seems relatively normal, you don't realize how stressful that time really is. So I don't know. I mean, it was a good, I'm sure it was hard to share that stuff, but I think it was a good thing because it made people on alert that this thing that they loved was kind of under threat, if you will.
Yeah, we sort of we leaned into our web store a little bit more than we had in the past and had to really rely on it. And that was tricky though, because it required setting up all new processes for how to bring in an order and how to, make sure that we were tagging it for the right customer and, like things that don't sound like big things, but when you're making like a huge policy shift or procedural shift, that it is actually really draining to suddenly do everything that you were doing in a totally different way.
Yeah.
And so that was part of it. It was just like trying to remember to do all the steps that you needed to do to like, verify the order, to when to contact the customer, to follow up with this, that, and the other. And then trying to get our subscribers to come and pick up their books. Comic Shop stopped shipping. And so my customers were like, okay, well, I'll just come back when there are comics again. I'm like, but you have comics now. Can you come and get them? Can I bring them to your house? Like, I don't care where you live. I will deliver your comics. I was driving comics to like 2 hours away to try to just get revenue in. Basically, I was trying to hold on to every cent that I could get. We were doing Facebook live sales 5 days a week at one point, which was absurd.
Mm-hmm.
We changed that to doing it twice a week because it was just insane. But there was this like feeling of desperation. Like I have to hold on to every penny coming in. I have to make sure that I can, make it so that my family can eat and that the roof is still over my head and that I'm still here for my staff to come back to jobs, because that's important too. Like it was a grind to make sure that everything was stable and functional and moving forward.
I have to say, what an amazing time to become the president of ComicsPro. That is, I mean, like, I don't know. So let's get into that. You were named ComicsPro president at February's annual meeting. I am interested. It feels like that is like a very ideal role for you, because it seems like you've always been very passionate about like, spreading the love of comics, talking to people about there's different ways to do things, whether that's librarians or whomever. Given all that, given all of your extracurriculars and your interests and everything like that, was that something that meant a lot to you, given your passion for the medium?
Yeah, I feel like I was a vice president for several years, and it was a role in which I guess I took it on with as much activity and passion as I would as if I was a president at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've always sort of operated with this. I guess I really want to improve retail. Mm-hmm. I really want to improve the comics industry. And so I have a lot of conversations to gain information about how the different parts of the industry work, to try to find ways to make it work better. And I spend a lot of time educating retailers or advising retailers, helping them with floor plans, that sort of thing, talking through troubleshooting with, hiring and all sorts of things like that. And I love doing that. And so being able to be in a more official position where I can be the sort of the vocal person is like, all right, I'm coming to you as president of ComicsPro now. This isn't just, a conversation between a board member and you, but now it's a conversation between the president and you. So let's really figure out how to make this work. So it just gives me that little bit of extra, ability to have some more presence, I guess, behind, or some more authority, I guess, behind our conversations. But one thing I think that I bring to the role that I think is pretty valuable is that I am, I'm very social. So like I spend a lot of time talking to people in social settings. I'm very comfortable speaking in front of people. I am, very comfortable doing things like this podcast and, quoting for articles. And I want ComicsPro to become more known, to have that name really mean something more. I want to expand the organization. I want to grow its reach. I want to grow its recognition. And I think that I am the sort of person that can make that happen just by, continuing on what I'm doing. But now that I have the word president in my list of titles, that just allows me to be that much more effective.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I have to say, you said like, you can get in conversation with people and making sure that you know everything that's going on and everything like that. I did an article last week about the big Marvel Penguin Random House Publishing Services deal for distribution. And I talked to a retailer who specifically named you as saying, like, as soon as this stuff was out, they were like, Jenn Haines was on the phone with like the movers and shakers behind the deal, trying to make sure that we know everything and that everyone at ComicsPro knew what was going on. They were like, just, Jenn is amazing. And I just thought that was really great because, it's one thing to have a title. It's another thing to, and this isn't me like slandering previous presidents or something like that, but it's one thing to have a title. Mm-hmm. It's another thing to live up to the needs of your organization in such a way. And it seems like, well, you're certainly backing it up in the eyes of that person. That's for sure.
Well, I'm glad. I mean, I'm not doing it for accolades. I also like, every so often I like to hear them. Yeah. I mean, it's a big shift in the industry, the Marvel Penguin Random House thing. And it's really important for people to have the clearest information possible. And ComicsPro members are the retailers who have the clearest information possible right now, because I literally spent all day that day talking to Marvel, talking to Penguin Random House, talking with anybody that I could talk with to get all the possible details that I could and asking the questions that I knew retailers were going to have to be able to present that information to ComicsPro members in a thorough manner so that they knew sort of like what to expect and what they were looking at and what they would need to do and what they didn't need to do, which was panic. They did not need to panic. So I think it's important to have a lot of communication about what's going on, because the last year has been, not only has it been brutal because of the pandemic, but there's just been so much change that it's been really scary. And it's like the ground is constantly shifting. We don't know what's going to happen next. It feels like something could happen at any moment. And so when something does happen, like this deal, the first reaction is, oh my God, I'm going to have to change stuff. I'm going to lose this. What's going to happen? This is just like this other thing. But when you then, so it's my job, and it's very important to me that I be able to go in as quickly and as effectively as possible to say, it's okay. This is how it's going to work. You don't need to worry. Here's all the reassurance that you need. Hopefully I've answered all your questions, but if you have more, I will take them to the people who can answer them. So hopefully I achieved that.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I've talked to a ton of retailers over the years. I am actually the very specific type of nerd who, when given the opportunity to fly to a convention or anything like that, instead of doing that, I actually went down to 2018's ComicsPro annual meeting in Portland. And I mostly did that so I could hang out with John, because John Hendrick from Big Bang, and I never actually met him. So I hung out with him and a bunch of other folks that I know. And it's like, when you talk to really anybody, I mean, let's be honest, this is just a human thing to a certain degree. But with retailers, a lot of the problem with deals like this is that they're announced and there's so many unanswered questions that what immediately becomes the top topic of discussion is like what it could mean. And if you can go into it with as many of those questions answered, then all of a sudden it's not about what it could mean. It is about what it does mean, because you know what it means. And like, that's why that work like you were doing there is so important, and also I want to give them credit. Everyone I talked to was thrilled with the amount of information that both Marvel and Penguin Random House had.
Oh, yeah.
Out when it came out.
Penguin Random House was ready to go. They had a full FAQ on their website for anyone to read that answered like so many questions. It was amazing. And
right.
I think to a certain extent, people just aren't used to that. And so no one knew to go there and see what was on the website. So it was part of my job was just saying like, look, here's what this FAQ says. Here's the link to it. You can go read the whole thing. But let me just tell you some pieces as well as some other stuff that I've learned from talking to people.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think, it is very well planned. It's been worked on for the last year coming to this agreement. So it's very well planned, and it's clear in how they rolled it out and how they announced it that they knew what they were doing and they had all the questions already answered.
So now that you know a lot about it, how are you feeling about it?
I love it personally. I was ecstatic when I got the news. I think that, Penguin Random House is a great company. They've done a lot of good over the last several years for comics. By selling graphic novels to bookstores, they have actually helped to increase those sales charts for graphic novels, to increase the awareness about graphic novels, to increase their presence in the market. And this is like a step that I think many people were kind of seeing on the horizon. And so it's really neat to have this be here now and to see how it's going to work and if it's going to work, and hopefully it's going to work. But I do think having more competition in distribution is good for everyone, because just as more competition in retail can be good because it can push you to doing better things. It can push you to finding ways to provide a service that is comparable to your competition so that you are now fighting for that customer base.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, this move will put some pressure on other distributors to maybe change what they've been doing, that they've been able to do. Diamond has been able to do a lot of things without any competition at all for a very long time. And so now, they are in a position where customers are going to be choosing between them and Penguin Random House for their Marvel comics. I don't know that anybody will. I'm not sure who will benefit from staying with Diamond, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's just an organizational piece that people will benefit from. So people who don't want the complications of ordering from another distributor may choose to stay with Diamond. And that's a conversation I've had with a few people. And it's weird for me because I've always used so many distributors that having another distributor is just not a big deal for me.
Yeah.
But a lot of the concern is around point of sale integration.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So how easy is it to bring that stuff in? Because one of the things that we've experienced with, obviously with the DC Lunar situation, is that getting our data into programs like Comic Suite, the in-house Diamond point of sale system, has been very difficult, and it still doesn't totally work. It doesn't work the same way as bringing in Diamond's books. This is going to be different because the books will still be at Diamond. They'll still be bringing in the books to sell to sub-distribute to some stores that decide to stay with them. But it means that they're going to have all that information on hand as opposed to having to get it from Lunar to put it into Comic Suite. So it's a little bit different, and I do think that it's going to work. And
Mm-hmm.
there's time as well to make it work.
That is a huge difference.
It's just a really different situation.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I saw some people tweeting, like not retailers and stuff, but were saying like, aren't you going to be mad at DC now or Marvel now because you were mad at DC? I'm like, these are wildly different situations.
Yeah, wildly different situations for sure. It's, it's interesting you said, not retailers tweeting. The the number of fans who like want to talk about this but have no idea what's actually going on, that's been kind of weird to see. I'm like, this is not, you guys don't know what's happening at all.
Yeah.
You're just making wild speculations about what this means.
The business stuff has become more of a topic of just, I mean, I say that as a person who regularly does business stuff. So that makes, I might be a contributing factor to the problem, to be honest, but, or, I mean, you know, the problem, but like the growth of that. But at the same time, it's just like, it is really fascinating how quick to, I'm like, I'm very doom and gloom adverse. I'm like the type of person who's like, let's see what this means first. Like, let's not say this is the apocalypse until we get a little bit more view of it. And like, that's, again, like, that's the good thing about the Penguin Random House deals is there was so much transparency from the start. And that makes a massive difference in whether or not you're going to go down the doom and gloom route. It did not stop people from going that route, but at the same time, there was a bit. I will say, though, there was one shop I know who specifically said that one shop that I talked to said that they were going to order from both Penguin and from Diamond and just kind of like A/B test it. And I thought that was really interesting.
Huh. Yeah, that is really interesting. Yeah, I don't know. The other thing I'm really, as a Canadian, this has so many benefits for me as well because, you know, ordering stuff from Diamond, getting damage replacements or restocks would take 2 weeks or longer. And now I'm going to get those restocks and damage replacements in a matter of days, which is a huge, huge difference. Shipping rates, right? So my shipping from Diamond is around 8%, and it's free with Penguin Random House. And there's other costs as well with dealing with Diamond, plus exchange rate. And so I actually am going to be gaining 5% in my discount instead of losing a discount.
Right.
Which is crazy because, yeah, ostensibly, you know, my Marvel discount is 55%. But when I take into account all the extra payments and costs associated with doing business with Diamond, I actually am really only getting 45%. Like that, it's really amazing. I hope that retailers take the time to actually look at their shipping costs, to actually look at all the additional costs that they're paying to Diamond to see what their discount actually is, instead of being worried about going from 55 to 50%.
Yeah, it's not
because
it's not as obvious as that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting talking to shop. The reordering thing is very popular. People are like, "Oh my god!" Like being able to get these books like faster is going to be like a game changer. But it is funny though. Like you were talking about ordering from so many different distributors. Like one person I talk to pretty regularly is Steve Anderson from Third Eye, and like Steve is used to ordering from like a billion distributors. So it's always funny talking to him about it. It's just like, another day, another distributor.
Yeah. Yep, definitely.
well, let's close. I just want to talk a little bit about the future to close. You've been invested in, like, you know, you're family focused. You're focused on being inclusive. And those are things that are both good for your business, but also good for the future of your business because, you know, a kid today could be tomorrow's like independent comics reader. There's been a lot of changes to the world of comics over the past year. Where we're at right now, obviously it's a very weird time, but how are you feeling about the future of comics right now?
I think that the pandemic forced retailers to find new ways to do business that they didn't think about before, or they didn't have time to try before. And it pushed them to making those changes. And so I feel like we all kind of came out of it stronger than we went in. You know, we all came out of it with new tools, with new ways to, you know, weather different situations, with new crisis management modes. I think we all got a lot stronger. And I think that, you know, I do think that during the shutdown or during the last year, there's been a big increase in speculator activity in comics because they have a lot more time on their hands to be able to do like research about what to buy. And then there's a lot of time spent talking about what they should buy. And I do feel like that's a bit of a bubble that's going to burst. I don't know when it's going to burst, but I do feel like at some point they're all going to realize that these comics aren't actually as valuable as they want to make them. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. That there is an upper ceiling and that we're eventually going to hit that, and it's going to right itself a little bit, because right now they're all sort of listening to each other, but they're not actually listening to any like comic shops to tell them like what print runs are kind of actually like and how rare a comic actually is, and how that book was $1 last week, and now you want $50 for it? Like, that seems absurd. And they've created these little communities where they deal with each other, but they could actually get books for less money if they went to their local comic shop, which is the place that's bringing in the comics, and they should probably support it. So
Yeah.
that part of the market has been really weird to watch developing over the last year. And I think it's still got legs. I do. But I do think that it's going to, when, life resumes a little bit more and in-person events resume, I do think it's going to decline quite a bit at that point. And hopefully, those people will turn more to shops for, deals, for speculation, that sort of thing. But yeah, I think that the fact that market exists too, shops got a lot more like savvy and had to be on their toes to make sure that, we were selling products at a fair price, as opposed to not being aware of a book skyrocketing in value overnight. So again, it's just like one more way that we've gotten stronger as a group of retailers. We understand more about the market. We are hitting these challenges head on. And now that we're kind of past the exhaustion phase of it, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I think that it's nothing but strong stores surviving and thriving. That's what it feels like anyways. I know like comic sales have been amazing, and the support from the publishers has been so incredible throughout this, providing us with, whether it's free variants or credits back on our accounts, an increase in returnability. That's been amazingly supportive to help us. And those things are going to continue, which is fantastic, because that's where we always wanted to be heading, is to more returnability and more lessening the risk that's placed on retailers, having publishers absorb more risk instead of putting 100% of the risk on retailers. So that has been great to see those shifts happen in the market, and to see publishers experience success from offering returnability, to know that they can continue to use that as a tool going forward. I
love it. Yeah, I'm hopeful in the same ways you are. But Jenn, that is all I have for you. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about, the dragon and its glorious origins, everything you do, and everything that's still to come. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me on. I do love talking about this stuff. So anytime.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with retailer Jenn Haines. You can find her on Twitter at Jav, that's Jav Haines, and at her shop, The Dragon, in Guelph, Ontario. Love Off Panel, want to support it? Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts today and give the show a rating and review while you're at it, but 5 stars only. You can also support the show by backing it on Patreon. Find the show at patreon.com/offpanel, and when you back it on there, you get early access to each week's podcast, as well as weekly content and more. Want even more? Subscribe to my subscription comic site, Sketched, at sketch.com for long-form articles, interviews, and the rest of the site's content and its members-only forum. You can find Off Panel and Sketched on social media by liking it on Facebook at /Sketched, that's SKTCHD, follow on Twitter and Instagram at @SketchComic, or following me at @SliceFriedGold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Scott Buon, Michael Tunk, Canadian by Proxy, Johnny Kanan, Zach Thompson, Bradley Roeder, Carl Troy, Megan Marsden, Brandon DePillis, Patrick Brower, Declan Shalvey, Dan Garino, Josh Williamson, Adam Freeman, Ben Wild, Brian Klein Q, SB, Antonio Offen, Nick Bennett, Daniel Whitfield, Scotty Young, Susanna Polo, Jeff Weira, Reed Hinkley Barnes, Mario Tiambang, AbductedTheComic.com, Andrew Carita, Matt Mahoney, Charlie Chu, Stephen Hole, Pensacola Pop Comics, Kim Eslam, Philip Myra, Christian Shelton, Kenny Porter, Chris Pacello, Torin Grunbeck, Buzz Bubbles, Christopher Todd, Transmitter Down, Waltz Comics and Books, Carl Mizell, Danny Ollie, Paul Salate, Sakil Wilson, Alex Dimitriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Leanna Kangas, Wesley Gift, Sean Kirkham, Alistair Ross, Julio Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Reinwatt, Vita Ayala, Tara Ferguson, Dave Slusher, WMQ Comics, Akil Kokachi, Sean Pinello, Kent Heidelman, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, David Kelly, Rob Wilson IV, Nick Polito, Brendan Fletcher, Gary Maloney, Jonathan Nilsson, Matthew Groom, Jason Massey, Adam Bogert, Matthew Taylor, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Braldy, Nick Hall, Bjorn Basin, John Hendricks, Steve Anderson, Ian Maxwell, Cliff Chang, Benjamin Shipper, Colin McMahon, Chris Palmer, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Kat McKenzie, Adam Highfield, Fiona Staples, Chris O'Halloran, Mark Abnett, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonakos, Norbert, Nicolo, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off Panel's theme song just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.